Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. This is part 2 of our look at Dinner Ladies, the Victoria Wood sitcom from the late 90s. We are in the midst of discussing a specific episode, that's Series 2, Episode 2, Trouble. And we've already talked about some of the main players. Victoria Wood we've covered, that's in the first half, so go and listen to that if you haven't already. We've talked about some of the other actors. We haven't talked about Julie Walters yet, we haven't talked about Anne Reid yet, so we've got all that still to come, and a little bit more dissection of the show itself. So if you're ready, let's jump straight in.
Well, yeah, so as Dolly arrives, we start to establish the fact that Jean, her husband, has left her, and so she's been in a foul mood for the last few days, and they're all a little bit scared because she's been difficult to be around. But just plot-wise, we're finding out here, okay, so the husband that she spent a few episodes moaning about has now left. She's run off with the dental hygienist.
And again, this is something that is dropped on us kind of from a great height. This is presented as is. We haven't had any build-up like, oh, I think my husband might be up to something, like anything like that. We did see both Dolly and Jean's husbands in a previous episode, and they're both just kind of these useless men in their own ways. You know, it's kind of like, oh, my husband, I'm going to moan about him, but, you know, ultimately would never split up because we just stuck together forever. But what we get here is, oh, well, the husband's moved on. He's found himself a thin-lipped dental hygienist who's probably much younger.
I'm sorry, but you've got me again there. Thin-lipped. Oh,
Yeah.
what a wonderful adjective.
Just an unnecessary insult to just throw in.
What's that writing?
We have no reason to think that her husband, what we've seen of him, who could kind of woo a younger woman or anything. So Jean did not see this coming, and perhaps that's a deliberate writing. We get it dropped on us as an audience in this, and Jean is dealing with the consequences, but in the same way that Jean's been hit like a ton of bricks by this. You know,
Yes,
it's the betrayal, it's the tumult, it's the complete unanchoring of your life, even if that is a negative anchor. It's like when Stan's dad dies.
Yes.
It's a release, but then like, oh God, I'm free. What do I do?
I'm drifting, yeah.
And Jean's dealing with that, but also what we're really getting here is the sort of bitter hatred and the
So Jean's angry and lashing out at everyone.
yes, and then the problem being she's lashing out at everybody else. And so she's driven Dolly to needing a Mars bar.
So Dolly, calorie obsessed, is going to screw it all. I'm eating this Mars bar.
I just wanted to hold it.
Yeah, there's a lovely bit of acting from Thelma Bala there. She smells the Mars bar.
in the wrapper.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, so Jean doesn't arrive. So basically this scene climaxes with the arrival of Jean. But before Jean arrives, all the others arrive. So we talked about Dolly. The next one in is Anita. So tell me about the actor who plays Anita.
Yeah, well, have you ever seen Shobna Gulati in anything else?
Well, am I right in thinking she's also in Coronation Street?
She's a regular on Coronation Street.
Yeah, so the answer to your question is no, I haven't, but I don't watch Coronation
exactly,
Street.
because who's seen Coronation Street? It's certainly, if you look on IMDb, this is Shobna Gulati's first credit. So it's a first TV thing. Obviously, she's been doing stuff before that, but it might be more stage or whatever. She's, like the rest of these, brought up in, Lancashire and brought up in Oldham. I don't know much. I couldn't find much about her, like, early life. Her parents are Indian, so she's second generation.
Yeah.
She's not the obvious kind of, was an actor all her life. She went to university and studied Arabic and Eastern politics.
Oh, that's interesting.
So obviously nothing to do with drama, particularly. And I don't know much about her before 1998 when she's doing this. She moved to London at some point. Now, I presume that was to pursue acting as a career. But also she had a child in the mid-90s, like as a single mother. The man wasn't involved. And that is not something that you can tie in easily with a struggling acting career. That is not So I presume she wasn't working much as an actor because she was raising a child. But I think that's very interesting, that little life story of hers, which I don't know the details of it, but it's very interesting considering what comes later with Anita's character.
Yes.
If I dare just throw spoilers in for later, is that she gets pregnant and has a child, kind of accidental pregnancy, and has a child barely even realizing she was pregnant.
Yeah.
we never really get anything from that plot in terms of Anita.
It's really interesting because the way that works, because of the time jumps between episodes, like suddenly we find out she's pregnant and then there's a whole episode where there's a baby. But yeah, you never feel at all invested in that, really.
Well, that's it. The whole point is they're a baby, they don't know whose it is, and at the end it turns out it's Anita's. And then we get the next episode, she pops in to visit because she's on maternity leave.
Yeah.
And then the episode after that, she's like, oh, can I start coming back a few mornings? Yeah, of course you can. Never even are like, oh, who's looking after the baby? My mum, you know.
The episode where she came back in on maternity leave, I don't know, it must have been a couple of days since I'd watched the previous episode. And I'd forgotten she'd had a baby. Because it was so throwaway.
Yeah, and that's perhaps what I've been sort of needling at in terms of the writing and the structure. There's these kind of things. It feels like we're deliberately not getting much of their lives outside of work, but then we're also using their personal lives for plot points. So we need to find that balance somewhere. Mm-hmm. We get a mention later on. Anita says something along the lines of like, oh, I only work here just to get me out of the house kind of thing. Like, there's a sense she doesn't need the money. Yeah, she can raise this child on her own and like she'll be okay. But she's also completely thick. Like,
yeah, I mean that's the
character.
That's the main characterization of Anita. She's just dense. She's really thick. Like she doesn't, you know, there's humor mined from the fact that she gets words wrong and she misremembers things. But that's not. It's not just that. You know, it's like that she's got absolutely no common sense. She's got nothing between the ears. You know.
Anita, can you take another jug of juice up to the meeting? A lot of ice. Cold ice, please.
Again, credit to the writing and performance that doesn't just come across as a silly comedy character. I mean, it's a comedy character, but it feels like it's...
It sort of does to me. She's my least favourite character. I think it's just too broad for my liking.
Well, I'll tell you what's really weird, and again, this is just a thing of like, why did you write this? Like, there's an episode later on where we get a work experience girl comes in, just for one episode. She's called Siobhan, and she's thick. She's Anita.
Yeah.
She's a thick girl who not just doesn't have any experience, but doesn't have any common sense to put anything together. Doesn't really add much to the episode. Never see her again.
I remember that episode thinking, what the hell was that about? I'm not really sure what she added.
And this is Victoria Wood wrote this all on her own, redrafted it on her own, blah blah blah. And I'm sure she got notes from the producer and whatever, but maybe just let's have a script editor take a look at this and throw, like, someone you trust, let them throw some things at you. And she describes it as a very lonely experience, like the writing of it, and found it really difficult.
Interesting.
Because you write a self-contained play or a sketch, it sort of serves itself and you can finish it. And I think she was struggled with the kind of never-ending plot element of it and ended it to get out of that. So yeah, there we go. So that's Shobna Gulati.
So
and then she was in Coronation Street, sort of from in the 2000s for like a good 10 years. She was in that, like, on and off. And of course, she was in Finding Fatima, the well-known Muslim romantic comedy. She played a mother in that. And she also, this is a tangential sitcom connection, but she's played in the tour of everybody's talking about Jamie, the musical. In that touring show, she plays the character of Ray, which was originated by Mina Anwar, who we saw in The Thin Blue Line. So there we go. That's my tangential connection to something we've done before.
We'll take that. Okay, let's go back to the scene. So we've got one more. Well, Jean's not arrived yet. We're still waiting for her to arrive like a hurricane. But there's one more dinner lady to arrive, and that's Twinkle, Maxine Peake.
Yeah. Borderline national treasure, Maxine Peake.
Yeah. So this is her first role, right?
Well, there's a few other things she's done prior to this, but she was straight out of drama school. She went to RADA at 21, and this was the thing she did as soon as she came out. So I think she's about 23, 24 here. And what a role, you know, like what a part to get when you're just at the beginning of.
Can I tell you my story about this, which you probably already know because you're extensive research, but I've done some research. I was listening to Alexi Sale's podcast, and he had Diane Morgan on, and it turns out that Diane Morgan and Maxine Peake were best mates at RADA. And that they were both up for this role, and obviously Maxine Peake got it.
I can see her playing that, actually.
Yeah, it was very similar. But because she said, you know, this is a role I was born to play, and bloody Maxine got it. But Alexis Sale said to her, well, you know, these things all happen for a reason, and, you know, the career that you've got now, you wouldn't have had that if you'd have got Dinner Ladies. And she went, no, I'd have had Maxine Peake's career. Yeah.
There's no doubt, like Maxine Peake, as much as this role obviously gave her a great start, you kind of don't see her again for a few years. It's not like she jumped straight from this into something else. And the role here, it's great for getting you noticed, but it's not a role that is kind of really showing off your acting talents.
No, it's not.
Particularly as Maxine Peake has gone on to be a quite a renowned drama actor rather than comedy.
Yes.
But, I mean, first thing we got to notice in the second series is that she's about half the size that she is in the first series.
So step back. The first thing you notice in the first episode is, oh my God, that's Maxine Peake. Why is she so big? She's just, I'm not trying to body shame anyone here, but she's just a lot bigger than I think of Maxine Peake.
Maxine Peake, yeah. And then come the second series, she's slimmed down dramatically to the point where she's wearing in the second series, she's wearing like a bodysuit underneath her clothes, like a fat suit, because she was so much thinner that they thought we have to meet her in the middle somewhere. But then her face looks really thin. And it's not like it's integral to the character or anything like that. But I think there's an important for the character that Twinkle is not a sexy young woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's a normal young woman who is like going out and she doesn't really give a shit. She'll go out and get pissed and have a kebab.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I better worry about my weight and make sure I look good because I'm an actor. That kind of vibe.
I think there's a nice contrast between the characters of Anita and Twinkle. So Anita, as we said, she's stupid. She's thick. Twinkle is not thick. She's streetwise. There's a bit in this where when Victoria Wood says Nobby Styles, and she reels off Nobby Styles' statistics and all that kind of thing. So she knows stuff. She'd be good in a pub quiz type of smarts.
What do you reckon then? Are you really 3 weeks late?
Yeah, I am, Bran.
Do you know when who it was type thing?
Oh, yeah. It's a really nice bloke, actually. We're just like watching vids and having a drink and that. He done us a frozen pizza. He just took it out the oven and,
Did he use protection?
Oven mitts.
But she is a working class young woman who is working in a canteen. She's not gone to university, but she's not thick.
She's not thick. She just doesn't care. And she knows this is a stupid job that is pointless and like she's not going to go anywhere. And she hasn't hit that stage of her life yet where she's going to go, hang on, what do I want to do in my life? This isn't enough for me. So it feels like she will hit that point at some point. But, whatever. We don't get that far with the character. But at this stage, she works this job because it pays enough money so she can go out and get hammered at the weekend and buy some pills and go raving. Yeah. And that's enough. At her stage in life, that's okay.
That is what she wants out of life.
Exactly. And I think the character's supposed to be like, 19, 20, that kind of thing. That's the vibe I get. And I think she's an interesting addition to that group, whereas Anita as a younger person doesn't add kind of enough because Twinkle can give as much as she gets, and she is a strong character.
I like her. I like Twinkle.
Yeah. So what about Maxine Peake then? Yeah. So this was, like I say, one of her earlier roles, but she went on to sitcom stuff. She was in Early Doors. She was in the first series of Early Doors in 2003.
Yes.
First series of Early Doors, notable for both Maxine Peake and James McAvoy being regular characters and being noticeably absent in the second series because they both got parts in Shameless and went off to do that instead.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I know Shameless is not a sitcom, it's sort of outside of our brief, but the same thing happened. Maxine Peake and James McAvoy were in the first series of Shameless, and then when it carried on and sort of went on for years, again, they both disappeared. They both went on to bigger things from Shameless as well.
Yeah, because they were noticeably good. Like they're really talented. Like obviously Shameless particularly, like that's packed full of acting talent, and a lot of them got really great notice from Shameless. But yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes you're just the right place, right time, maybe young enough that people can go, look how much we can do with this person's career, and they'll take them off. But this is all Manchester stuff, isn't it? It's all very northern-based stuff, and then at some point you either break out of that or you go and work on Coronation Street.
Sure. Yeah.
So another little sort of comedy connection for us. In 2008, she played Joan Le Measurer in Hancock and Joan, which was a sort of a TV drama about the affair between Tony Hancock and
I don't think I saw that.
Joan Le Measurer. So she was in that. That was just a little comedy connection for us there. And all the stuff. I think mostly she's known for drama stuff these days. And again, it's going to be interesting. She's about the same age as you, actually. She's in her late 40s, and it'll be interesting to see where she transfers. Now you're going into that kind of like what characters do you play in your 50s as a woman, particularly? Like that becomes a sort of a grey area. And then for National Treasure status, you need to be able to transition into playing curmudgeonly old women in period dramas. That's the only way to do it. Yeah. She's also very politically active.
Yeah, she is. Well, this is what might prevent her becoming a national treasure. Because she's very left-wing. She's something of a Corbynite, wouldn't she?
Bordering on communist.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Okay, so let's go. So now we've got all our dinner ladies assembled. Now Jean arrives. So we've already talked a little bit about Jean's story here. But as a character, this recent separation of her marriage, that aside, as a character, she provides a really good foil for Dolly. Her and Dolly are something of a double act. Dolly's got all these airs and graces, and Jean's constantly undercutting and undermining her. And it's they work really well as a double act.
And there's a definite idea that they've been friends for years. They haven't just worked together here, and that's how they know each other.
It's like when you go to university and try and reinvent yourself, and then your mate from school comes and throws a spanner in it, all your work.
They are friends, and it's a slightly combative relationship, but ultimately, one with love.
Yeah.
And interesting that and I don't know the full story about this, but Thelma Barlow and Anne Reid are friends from decades back.
Anne Reid so I know this. Anne Reid was in Coronation Street when it started. Like she was in Coronation Street in the 60s. She played Ken Barlow's first wife.
Yeah, exactly. That was what she was, most famous for a time. But Anne Reid left Coronation Street before Thelma Barlow joined.
Oh my goodness! Wow,
so they did not work together on Coronation Street. That was not how they know each other. But I watched Thelma Barlow's "This Is Your Life," and Anne Reid comes out as like an old friend. Oh, you remember when we went on holidays together and this happened? Not as you worked on this together. So I don't know how they know each other, to be honest, but they obviously run in some similar circles.
So Anne Reid, the only thing I really know about Anne Reid is that she had sex with James Bond in The Mother. Was that after Dinner Ladies?
Shag Daniel Craig. Yeah, that was after.
It was drama with Daniel Craig where the plot is he has an affair with an older woman, Anne Reid being the older woman. And it was a little bit scandalous, this old lady having sex on television. And, it wouldn't be the same if the age difference was the other way, as it is in pretty much everything else. So it was a sort of interesting, it hit the headlines. But, confession, I never actually saw it. I don't know if it was any good.
And it's great. And it's Daniel Craig pre-Bond, obviously, and when he was doing proper films. And Anne Reid post Dinner Ladies, but she was a well-established dramatic actor before that anyway, and she's again one of those people who's you just see her all over the place. But her early career was marked by Coronation Street. Yeah, she went in that quite early, and she went through RADA as well and all that kind of thing, rep theatre, all that. Actually, she was in a few episodes of Hancock's Half Hour in the late 50s. That was some of her earlier roles. Joined Coronation Street in 1961. And she was in it for 10 years. So, and that early Coronation Street when it was really being established. And a very significant role. And wasn't the comedy role. She was, some pretty dark stuff and nasty things happened to her. In the end, she got electrocuted by a hairdryer. That was how she... But it was a very popular character. It was like one of the big characters in Coronation Street. She was very famous and very well known. And so she had that kind of hangover of Coronation Street a bit. She also took some time out. She had a child and all this sort of stuff. So had a little bit of a career break at that point. But then comes back in the late 70s, 80s, Victoria Wood. Straight into Victoria Wood stuff. She appears in a lot of her stuff straight away. But then, stage stuff, lots of little appearances here and there, dramatic comedy. She just seems like a really dependable, solid actor who will get the job done. Okay,
so Jean arrives. She's in a filthy mood. She's rude to everyone.
And it is obviously very different to her normal character, to what we see. But it's not out of place. It's like, Jean's got that viciousness in her. Yes. And she just, all that's changed is she doesn't care anymore about how you feel.
And we've got a bit here where Bren's got the flowers that Stan gave her. Tony, who, wants to ask Bren out, wants indeed to invite her on holiday. He thinks, she's got a man now. She's got these flowers.
The Calagas man.
Yeah, because she was supposed to have a date at the weekend or something like that. There's this misunderstanding. But what's annoying about it is that Bren sort of willfully allows this misunderstanding to go on. Why don't she just say, oh no, Stan gave me those. I didn't go on that date.
Well, Stan does specifically say, don't mention it to anyone. I don't want it to get around.
It just annoys me. It just feels like there's this whole farcical. He thinks one thing, she knows the other thing, and it's just like, why don't you just bloody talk to each other? Oh, it's annoying.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah.
In the first series, even, and it's their characters. They're both kind of a little bit like, oh well, she's obviously. Oh well, yeah. It's because later on when Tony's running around and he's organising a surprise for her birthday, but she reads that as. Oh, he's running around keeping secrets from me. Obviously, is knocking someone else off. But even that, she doesn't. It's not like, hey, I thought we had something going on. What's going on here? She's like, oh well, I suppose he's lost interest in me. That's what happens in it. So I'll just not say anything. Yeah. But that's her character. She's put upon. She thinks that she's not good enough for everyone, and so it completely works in terms of that character. Even if it is frustrating, it feels real.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it's unrealistic. It's just annoying.
Yeah, it just feels like Tony could be a bit more forthright.
Yes,
and we do see that in this episode where he bites the bullet and asks her to go on holiday with him.
Yeah,
and everyone around them is like that. And this is a long running thing. Like everyone around them is like, oh God, when are they going to get together? Look, I tell you what, I bet you 20 quid they don't get it on by Christmas.
Yeah.
And to that end, we get another sort of regular character.
Yeah, Jane, who's one of the customers. So she works in the building, and she comes every morning. She comes and buys 12 rounds of white toast.
Yeah, and that's Sue Devaney, who again is someone you sort of crops up in all sorts of things.
Well, I knew her face, and when I IMDb'd her, oh, Coronation Street for 10 years. Okay, I see.
Well, they all are. Yeah. Interestingly, Dinner Ladies did a theatre tour in 2009, based around a few episodes that have been kind of cobbled together. Andrew Dunn was in it as Tony. Shobna Gulati was in it, and then everyone else was recast. And then they did a new version of it a couple of years later, a little touring thing. And Sue Devaney was in it as Petula Gordino, who is Julie Walters' character. So they brought her in as an actor, but as a different character.
Okay. I think this character of Jane is sort of an avatar for the whole, the rest of the company, the customers, as it were.
Yeah, we have a nice little line in Other Customers that'll just pop in and have a few comedy lines, and it's a lovely little guest role, just pop in for a week and do something, and you'll see a lot of faces that you recognise from Victoria Wood things and Coronation Street and all that sort of stuff. Let's get into some meat of the plot here, that being that Jane is organising a work holiday to Marbella. Tony's already going. Someone's dropped out and there's a space. Does Tony want Bren to go? She obviously wasn't in the original plan. Like, obviously they would get together like, oh, should we take? Oh, Tony's a good laugh. Let's take Tony. They don't think of Bren because they might like her, but they're not. She doesn't seem the sort of person you want to take on a work piss up to Marbella. Exactly. But Tony wants to take her. Jane is like, oh yeah, bring her. That'd be great. But mostly because she doesn't want Steve Greengrass to come.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about kind of Bren's relationship to some of the other people in here. Like, she's not part of the fun party gang, but she
goes home to her bedsit on her own.
Yeah, but they would like hang out with her if she wanted to. Yeah, Tony kind of dances around a little bit, but ultimately just goes, look, Bren, do you want to come on holiday with us?
Yeah.
And pretty quickly she says, yeah, we sort of decided that's going to happen. But then, a bit obvious, Tony tells Anita that Bren needs to, like, oh, I haven't got time here. Anita, make sure you tell Bren this. Obviously, she's not going to tell it because not only is Anita thick, but she's also in love, and so she's only thinking about her boyfriend.
She's mooning around about her new boyfriend,
which is a nice little thing. Like, we've probably all been there, where you realize you're mentioning this person too much, but also, when your friend starts talking about someone. Oh, they do that in the Betweeners, don't they? Whenever he mentions his girlfriend, they smack him in the balls whenever he mentions his friend. Like you're saying, it's annoying when farcical elements are too obvious.
Yes.
That falls into this category for me. Oh, I'll get Anita to tell someone something. It's like, okay, well, let's all guess what's going to happen with that. And it only takes like 3 minutes to pay off or whatever anyway. So it's not like
it's not like a big dangling plot thread. I get you.
It's the same thing when Bren comes in the next episode and she's got the money for, I've gone to the bank, I've got 500 quid. It's to pay for my holiday and buy me bikini.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you must pay it by 10:30. Yeah, don't worry, I've got it here. It's definitely gonna get paid today.
Yeah.
And then Petula walks in and goes, oh, I need £500.
Sure.
Exactly. It's like, all right, we could be a bit more subtle in this, couldn't we?
Well, the main plot of Jean has moved on a little bit here because she's successfully been rude to all of her colleagues and they've sort of accepted it. But now she's rude to Jane, who is a customer.
Yeah.
And this culminates with Jean chucking a slice of toast at Jane and she's left with butter on her face.
Yeah.
To which I thought, oh, right, so Jean's going to get fired. Like, you can't do that in a workplace.
Well, this isn't even the last straw, is it? It's
No. Well, this is my point. Not that she'd get fired. I wasn't expecting, HR to come down and fill up to fire her. But what I was expecting was, okay, this is it. This is when we get the big, okay, I'm sorry, I've been so rude to everyone. But it doesn't. It carries on even longer.
And so the kind of the last straw is she's just going to turn on everyone, and finally Bren is the one who says, like, no, stop.
Yeah.
If you're going to throw toast at someone, chuck it at him.
I'm dealing with this in my own way.
Then get another way, Jean, because your way's rubbish. We've had enough, actually. We don't want to work with you anymore, actually. There's too many actuallys, but you know what I'm saying. Now go and sit in that flipping office, will you? And we'll decide what's going to happen about this. And don't say any more horrible things. Just go.
And it does feel perfectly realistic that because Jean comes out and goes, I'm sorry, I know I'm at rock bottom, I need help. And it feels realistic that, like, someone just needed to say it. Someone needs to break the spell, and that's all right. It's a nice moment. But then what happens? Her sister comes and picks her up. And we have a bit of fun with the sister, but...
Oh, the sister. See, again, this is another example of a character that's in literally half a scene. And every line she has is just brilliant.
How will you get back? Motorway?
With no man in the car, no thank you. No point begging to be ram-raided.
Well...
Which doesn't really make sense, but it's
doesn't
very,
make any
very
sense
funny.
at all. But yeah, that's Linda Bassett there, who's one of those faces you just sort of her from this kind of thing. But again, what does that add? And ultimately, all that happens is Jean goes off and comes back a couple of episodes later, revitalized. We've never heard mention of her having a sister before. That's kind of out of nowhere.
It's a sketch.
That's it. It's a sketch, and it's not adding anything. It's developing a character for an overarching character movement for the series, not for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm kind of getting at, as in I don't quite like the way that comes together, and it's funny and it's adding to the character, so it's fine. It all works, but it doesn't feel like good episodic writing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. I loved it. I loved it. But now you've just ruined it. No, I don't mean that. I'm exaggerating. What I mean is your criticism is accurate, but for me, it's just such a great scene, great little character moment. I think it's great.
But I think Wood's character and dialogue overcomes some structural issues. I'm not saying these are all fatal flaws, but I think she gets away with certain things because she's such a great dialogue writer.
Yeah.
But writing a kind of continuous plot like this that is episodic is a different kind of skill, I guess, and perhaps just one she hadn't done that much. If she did it again, which she never did, make another sitcom. Perhaps
without the dialogue, that character is completely superfluous. Like as you said, Jean could just disappear, or Jean could be sort of come out and apologise, and off she goes. I'm going to stay with my sister. That's it. We never see the sister again. There's no reason to have her there other than I've got this excellent dialogue I want to put in someone's mouth.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's enough.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's my point. That is enough. That is great. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Steve Greengrass here, played by Steve Housen. I'm not sure.
I don't know him.
That's his name. He's really best known because he's in The Full Monty. He's one of the main
course he
guys.
is.
He's the one who wants to kill himself.
I didn't recognise him, but yes, of course, yes.
So that's kind of what you're going to know him from. He was in Coronation Street as a regular.
Naturally.
And then we also have another actor who just appears as a one of our people who just appears as a customer, has a few lines and then disappears. In this case, it's Judy Flynn.
Yeah.
She'd just come off as being a regular on the British Empire. That's in terms of sitcom world, that's what she's best known with. And then towards the end, before we deal with the end of the plot, let's deal with the last of our major characters who we haven't talked about.
Yeah, so in the last scene here, we get Petula that comes in, who is Bren's mum, played by Julie Walters.
Yes.
So in the background, or off-screen indeed, Greengrass has fallen down the stairs, broken his knee, and therefore Bren can go on holiday. That's where we are going with this scene.
That's where we're moving to, yeah.
But that's just happening in the background. What's actually happening is that Julie Walters is stealing the show.
Yeah, and it's the most memorable character from the show. She's only in about half the episodes. And in this particular episode is really just there for a bit of comic relief. She doesn't really add anything, although she is setting up something that's going to develop later. That
Oh, yeah, I'm back. And this will tickle you. I'm pregnant.
Ridiculous. Just the way she enters and gets in a round of applause immediately.
She's a complete fantasist. She's disgusting, physically repellent, but and an awful mother. We've established that Brenda grew up in care because this absent mother.
But also, I don't think it gets mentioned in the show, but I was looking at something, they were talking about Julie Walters playing the character, and she had to have aged up because the character is 55.
What's that all?
Well, exactly, because Victoria Wood's character is 41.
Ah, okay.
Now, that's possible and perhaps makes a bit more sense why she wasn't a good mother and put her in care.
Yes.
And I don't think it's mentioned in the show, but I read somewhere she was supposed to be 55.
The character's pretty horrible, and I don't like the character. But by God, the delivery is incredible.
So, Mr. Winston does the ultrasound, goes like a dream, then takes off those glasses of his. He says, Patchoula Gordino, you have the uterus of a Wimbledon champion.
And it is, again, a great writing, a great performance to make a really unlikable character, a funny presence, a charming presence in a lot of ways, and not just hated. And that does take some doing.
She comes in with a variety of men. In this episode, she's got this chap with her who never says a word. He's just this sort of meek, balding, paunchy Asian fella. And she's so funny. She describes him as Reg. He's an Asian Roger Moore. Look at him, pure animal. He's like a panther.
Like a coiled spring.
and while she's saying this, we cut across to him, and he's sort of picking up Kit Kats and weighing them up in his hand and putting them back.
And again, just for some nice little wordplay. Oh, I asked him if I could wind my legs down onto his hard standing, and he jumped at it. Things like that. There's a lovely... And Julie Walters... I mean, I have been watching some more Victoria Wood stuff recently, just and kind of get the vibe of this. And Julie Walters is just great in everything. And it does feel like she's playing a different character in everything she does. I watched Pat and Margaret, for example, and she's... In Pat and Margaret, which isn't that funny. It's more of a light drama. It's not really comedy. And the character she plays in is kind of nasty and unpleasant, but in a realistic way. And it's not a fun character, and it's not a funny character, but she plays it just as well.
What year was Educating Rita? Was she nominated for an Oscar for that?
Yeah, 1983.
1983. So she is an Oscar-nominated actor. And she's still doing Victoria Wood. This is Julie Walters. I know she's mates with Victoria Wood. She doesn't need to be doing this anymore. Why is she doing this?
Yeah, well, just because you're Oscar nominated doesn't mean you're sort of in Hollywood now. It was a relatively small British film that just got attention, and obviously it helps your career. But she still...
I think my point really was that she proved herself to be a world-class serious actor, and she was coming back and doing this sketch show.
Yeah, well, I think you've got to remember that was not insignificant. For a start, she loves working with Victoria Wood. Secondly, they're friends. They are personal friends as well. And Victoria Wood is writing stuff for her. And she said numerous times, Mrs. Overall, favourite character I've ever played. Yeah. It's doing stuff that you're going to enjoy, stuff you're having fun with, and you can do it between, a 6-month run at the Garrick or whatever you're doing on something.
I would imagine that no matter how famous and you got Hollywood at your feet, then you still not got anyone writing anything this good for you.
But she's never gone Hollywood though, has she?
Harry Potter.
Well, exactly. So she did that. She did the Educating Rita, got an Oscar nominated for that. Oscar nominated again for Billy Elliot,
that's right,
which is, again, 15, film, 17 years later. British film. She's playing a very British character, but again, got a lot of notice for that. She's a totally different age by that point, different generation. Harry Potter straight after that, which, as much as, Harry Potter's a Hollywood thing, it was still a British industry. And she's playing that character alongside Mark Williams. Mark Williams isn't a national treasure. As much as we like him, that's a different level, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing you get Julie Walters in for. And then just consistently working stage, screen, everything she wants to do. She's a dame now. Did you know she was a dame?
Yeah, I did know that, yeah.
Yeah,
you know how I feel about the honour system. I'm not...
But I mean, talk about national treasure. Interestingly, I think Julie Walters is kind of retired now. She's sort of definitely slowing down.
Interesting.
She got cancer a few years ago, and as far as I can tell, came through it, but took that as a sort of slowing down point. Because she's only early 70s, she's compared to, for example, Thelma Barlow, who was about 70 when this show was made. So,
right, yeah.
So still plenty of life left in her if she wants to go and do those older lady roles.
Mm-hmm.
So, very end of the show, very end of the episode here, we get the little conclusion. And I actually really like this. I mean, I've been moaning a little bit about structural stuff in terms of writing, but I actually really like the ending because it draws together a lot of things.
Yeah.
Steve Greengrass's, oh, you know what, I always love going on holiday, but something always happens. Something happens, he slips.
Yeah.
Anita has dropped the orange juice. She comes in and says, oh, I've spilled orange juice. Don't worry, you'll just get off home. I'll sort it. Bren, I'll do everything, but then gets distracted. But Anita's stupid. She just drops stuff and walks away from it.
Yeah.
That was set up earlier, but it didn't feel like an obvious setup. It just felt like a bit of character stuff. We've got the whole plot about the holiday thing. It's Steve Greengrass who's fallen down. They're running around trying to save that. It's all nice. It comes together beautifully, and then we have the end moment.
Then I like the way it then plays out. So whilst we've got Julie Walters and Victoria Wood having this interaction, in the meantime, you've got Stan running around behind saying, oh, someone's fallen, we've got to get the ambulance. And that's kind of happening almost in the background of this scene.
Yeah, you know it's kind of going somewhere. You know something's got to happen with all this. But you're distracted by the central scene of Petula and Bren. And then at the very end, Tony comes in like, it doesn't matter what's happened, it's important who it's happened to. And it works for comedically, but Bren isn't thick. Why it takes so long for it to be like, for the penny to drop with her, what's happening, does feel a bit tortured. But there, the end result being that Bren can go on holiday with them after all.
That will definitely happen and all go off smoothly. Okay, well, I think we've probably finished our episode. Do you want to just talk about, you said you didn't like the way the series ended particularly. Let's talk about that a bit more.
It just feels a bit all rushed together, and I can't work out the circumstances. Did Victoria Wood decide she wanted to end it all and so wrote an ending into it? Was this originally written with an idea that might be another series, and then she was like, when in the process of writing, which she found very difficult, she suddenly kind of went like, nah, I'm going to finish this off. Because as much as there's things running through, these plot elements that are running through, the ending things feel a bit rushed. So all of a sudden we get, oh, by the way, Bren's like, apparently she's really good at trivia. Like, she's got a really good trivia mind, and so she's going to go on this TV show and win some money. Even though, like, one of her main character traits is that she can never remember the right name of someone. Like, her memory's a little bit scattershot. So, in terms of trivia, like, that's the worst possible, like, thing. All this stuff about the canteen, the canteen's closing down, and the job's all going to be gone anyway, and that kind of plays into it. But then at the same time, in the very last episode, they get given new uniforms. Obviously, like, doesn't make sense in the sense of we're going to shut the cafeteria like within the week. That doesn't really add anything. But then we also have they get these new uniforms and it has like branding on it, but we haven't had this whole kind of the canteen's being taken over by a corporate giant and we're going to have to fit in. Like, we don't get any of that. It just feels dropped on us. Feels like it was a half a plot that didn't get developed or something, like a plot idea that never quite played out. There's just lots of things like that just feel a bit... the last episodes feel a bit, we better get things finished, rather than anything else. So, Bren and Tony get together. Jean and Stan get together. Petula dies. But also gives us a bit of an ending in terms of it enables them to get the finances of what
they're wanting to basically start a new life in Scotland, and Petula's death facilitates that.
Yeah. They find all this money, and obviously the first thing she does is gives it out to everyone else, Brent.
Yeah.
But that means everyone else is just kind of like, I can go off and do that thing I wanted to do. And
I think it's a nice, happy ending. I think it's nice. I agree with you. It's very contrived. It feels like, I want to use an analogy of round a plug hole. Like everything's spinning around this end, and it's suddenly at the end, it all just falls into place. And yes, it is a bit jarring. But nevertheless, it's a nice happy ending. I liked it.
No, I agree. I'd rather have a sort of a contrite happy ending than no ending, or a kind of... I think the most appropriate ending would have been Tony and Bren get away, and the rest of them are just there, and like someone new comes in, and it's like that. Life goes on. That's because if that's the endearing message of Dinner Ladies, and potentially Victoria would kind of work all. It's like, this is our life, and we just get on with it. And the happy ending is Bren escaping from that, because that's who we really care about. And Tony as well, that's fine that he's the vector for that. And what they're escaping to is not like, oh, we won the lottery and we're going to go away. It's like, well, if we just get enough money together, we can buy a share in this bistro pub and we can run the restaurant. They're going to just a slightly more independent, in control of their own life, but it's still going to be a hard life, but they're going to be together and all this. Yeah. That's as happy as it gets.
Yeah. I don't think it'll work.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll work. I think it'll last a year, if that.
And everyone else, like, life goes on. Maybe you can have a bit of, like, some, Jean's got a new man and, like, things like that, and it's all right. But they're trying to tie in these big factories like this are closing down, the canteen's closing down, we're just going to have a sandwich trolley. And it is a bit, like, it's a bit sad. But it doesn't quite do enough to be social commentary on what's happening in industry in Britain in 1998 or whatever it is. Just doesn't quite do enough. I'm being nitpicky, I know, but and it does feel like Victoria Wood going, right, this is the last thing I'm doing with this. Let's give them a nice little happy ending, and I think that's all right. Very last thing I just want to address is how directly they deal with the millennium. Yeah, they literally have an episode on New Year's Eve, and like things are happening, and they all get trapped in the thing together. But it really places it in time. Obviously, it shows its age, but it's like, that was a thing. The millennium, New Year, New Year's 2000. It was a whole cultural thing that was happening at the time, and these episodes were going out at that time, so it was relevant. And I just like that it ties into that. It doesn't really do
I think so, but
directly with it.
It's funny, isn't it, that I don't think that the millennium at the time felt like this is a big deal. There was the whole white year 2K thing, but I don't really mean that. I mean this is a cultural moment. Yeah, but yeah. It's 2022 as we record this. You look back at it and you think, well, it wasn't really, was it? No big deal.
It's a completely arbitrary date. Yeah. It's pointless. But
so I think it is interesting when you watch this episode that, because it felt weird to me. It felt weird, like, oh, the millennium. Oh, yeah. What's the it's hardly worth making an episode about. But it was. It absolutely was a big deal in 1999. We were, oh God, this is a big thing.
Yeah, and then like just having it as a New Year's Eve episode, it wouldn't be much different. But it feels like, oh yeah, we do the Christmas episode because it's going to go out at Christmas. We've got to do a New Year's Eve episode because it's millennium. It's like, you've got to do it. It's rather than just a New Year's Eve thing. Yeah. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, you never get New Year's episodes of sitcoms, do you? We get lots of Christmas episodes, but
we did of course have the Time Gentlemen Please one straight after the Christmas one. Time
Gentlemen Please is slightly different because he had a lot of episodes to fill.
Anything I can hang this on to will be fine. Yeah. Right, so Dinner Ladies then. Come on, wrap it up. Sum up your thoughts. I know you enjoyed it a great deal, and I did as well, but go on.
Well, I think I think you used the word charming earlier, and it is charming. I think your criticism about all the characters speaking in the same manner, I think that is a fair criticism, and realistically that wouldn't be true. But, it is fiction. And frankly, I just love the way that they speak. I love the dialogue so much that I can forgive it. You've picked a few structural problems with it, which, again, I'm not really arguing with you about, but I hadn't really noticed them much because I just love the wordplay so much. And to me, that is what I enjoy. We've talked about this before. It's that sort of beautiful language that I really like. That specificity that Victoria Wood specialises in. That is right up my alley. And yeah, I really love this. I'm just sorry I'd never seen it before.
Yeah, I'm surprised you never had. Actually, I think there's a little bit of a window in your life where
it's just in that. It's just in that window of where I was letting my hair down.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. Like I said, I've been a little bit nitpicky with it, and that actually became worse for me because I went back and started watching some other Victoria Wood stuff. And I started seeing these same characters with the same voices and the same thing like 15 years earlier. And again, that's her style, and it's always still funny, and the characters still come through. I think that's important. The characters are always strong. You start seeing the same things again and again, and it's a little bit like, okay, there's definitely some crutches involved here. There's some things you're leaning on.
Yeah.
And even the Bren character is very similar to the stand-up character that Victoria Wood is when she's doing her stand-up bits. It's got a lot of similar mannerisms. This feels like this Bren character is Victoria Wood's kind of every woman state. I'm presenting my neuroses to you style of acting. So it's not a criticism necessarily, more of an observation, I think. Just like, okay, look, here's what I'm noticing, sort of at a second glance. Mm-hmm. And we haven't really, one thing we haven't really addressed, actually, in any great way, is that this is a female-dominated cast.
That's true.
In a way we saw in the rag trade. You know, it's all women, and then there's the male foreman and the slightly inept boss and that sort of thing. And I think that is crucial, because when we watched that, it felt like it was a statement. Here, it doesn't feel like it's saying something about female empowerment. It feels like it's just telling a story that happens to be women. Yeah. And that's what Victoria Wood is great at. It never feels like a token effort to be a female-driven story. She writes for women because that's what she knows, perhaps because that's what she finds most interesting, whatever. But it's true, and it feels honest, rather than trying to do something. And the rag trade was written by men, so, you know, like, that's the difference. Yeah. In the same way that Carla Lane's stuff, well, maybe not Bread, but Butterflies, it feels like it's written from a woman's point of view, because it is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And, you know, Victoria Wood, well, she died in 2016, didn't she? You know, she died prematurely. I think she had cancer, didn't she? In fact, I remember the papers describing it as her secret fight with cancer. And it wasn't secret, it was private. But, you know, the papers don't know the difference between those two. They ignore both. So when she died, there was a sort of genuine outpouring of loss and grief from both from the public and from people within the entertainment industry. And I think that, you know, we've sort of jokingly used the term national treasure all the way through this episode. But she seems like she was genuinely loved, not just for her talent, but it seems like she was a much appreciated person.
It was a joy to watch again.
Yeah, really, thank you for, because this was your idea, this one. Thank you for suggesting this. Okay, well, thanks for listening, everyone. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at BritComPod, or on Facebook. If you search for British Sitcom History Podcast, you'll find us there.
See ya.
Bye.